So welcome to Transform Gov, the digital government podcast, and I'm your host, Maeve Kneafsey. So Transform Gov is the podcast that looks at real-world insights into how technology and data are reshaping our public services. And we talk to those who are on the ground to give us their insights and we can benefit from their knowledge. So Transform Gov is part of the Ireland eGovernment Awards and it's brought to us in partnership with Accenture. I'm Maeve Kneafsey and today I am with Alan Smeaton. He's the Emeritus, if I said it right, Emeritus Professor of Computing at DCU, and he's the researcher actually who built Ireland's first AI teaching assistant. He's going to kill me for saying that, and now advises government on how to use AI responsibly. So Alan, you're very welcome to Transform Gov.
Thanks very much, Maeve.
Look, when did you first realise that AI wasn't just about analysing data, but actually could make decisions and take action?
Yeah, you're going to come back to those claims now about the first teaching. Yeah, okay, we're not going to let that go. When did I first realise? Well, I've been working with using technology for information access for a long time. And slowly we saw a creep of what we now call artificial intelligence into doing things like search and web search. But it wasn't always called artificial intelligence. And then more recently, I found that as I look back on the things I did even in the 80s, 90s and the early 90s, that's now called AI. So there's a bit of AI washing associated with it. So to answer your question, when did I first realise? I think it's always been ongoing, but in recent last couple of years, most especially, there's been a huge acceleration. Probably the turning point was about 10 or 12 years ago when neural networks started to have a real impact and to show what they could do. And when I was using neural networks in applications like computer vision and image analysis, I thought, wow, that's something we can't do by hand. So around about 10, 12 years ago was when it really impacted.
It's not overnight. And I remember I used to work in a magazine. My first job was called Computing. And that's a while ago. And we talked about AI then. But it only really had the capacity to do what it's doing, I think, in the last 10 years, right? Where it's revolutionised the potential.
Part of the reason was that there was no big data sets to work from to automatically induce rules. We were hand coding rules. I remember a project I wasn't involved in, but for language translation, which tried to come up with the set of rules to translate English into Irish and Irish into French. That's just impossible. And then it all became, when the internet happened and all of the data was generated as click logs and stuff like that, that led to the re-examination of machine learning to come up with rules. And that's when it reach scale, and then we could start to see some real progress. And
although we've seen Gen AI, we probably don't even know half the times we're using it, if you know what I mean, and experiences that we're having with it. But if we look at where we are today in terms of the public sector and governments, are we really just still in test phase, do you think, or is it really being implemented at some sort of scale?
It's impossible for me, especially who's outside of government, to have an overview of everything that's going on. But there are pockets of absolute excellence, and then there are desolate wastelands, if I can call it that, where there's
I'm not going to ask you which is the desolate wastelands.
Well, I'll tell you where the pockets of excellence are, and that's revenue. Revenue has always been the poster child for the adaptation of new technology. And revenue, they've been using generative AI for probably a year and a half, nearly 2 years now. The OGCIO, the Office for the Government Chief Information Officer, is another example of a good example, not a wasteland example, but a good example where they are on board and doing innovative things.
Yes, and we had John Barron from the Revenue Commissioners in talking about using Gen AI. In fact, they had been testing it quite a long time ago, I think.
Yeah.
And then OGCAO, we had Barry in as well. Barry Lowry talking to us about what they're doing. So you have to listen to those to hear what they're really doing. But in terms of, if we go back slightly to you using Gen AI as a kind of a teaching assistant with your students, I presume it was an experiment, but what was the goal? What were you trying to do?
It was the early days of ChatGPT when generative AI was just large language models. And what you could do with those large language models was you could prompt them, engineer them to give certain kind of responses or to stay within certain topics. And you could also fine tune them based on content, so that while the language model was trained on, quote unquote, the internet, you could introduce new stuff and say, just answer stuff, give answers to questions just from the material I've done. So I used to teach a course to marketing students on data analytics. They hated it because there was statistics in it. There was formula.
Marketing statistics. People think they don't go together, but actually
they have to go together. So what I did was I took one of the early versions of ChatGPT. I fine-tuned it with content. So I uploaded all the slides, all the materials. And I also found that when anybody is teaching, you've got these props, this printed material or the slide material, the slideware, but you also say things during class. So what I did was I recorded my lecture using an iPhone application, and I transcribed this automatically into speech. And I took the words that I used in a 2-hour lecture and also put that in as fine-tuned content. So that what we had was a language model which was fine-tuned on the official syllabus stuff, but also the stuff I'd mentioned, the anecdotes. Mm-hmm. And then I made that available anonymously through a third-party platform to 140-something students, where they could ask what they wanted and they could have a dialogue. If they asked for things that were outside the course, like what was the recipe for marmalade, they'd say that's not part of the course. So it would always steer back to the course content. And they were able to ask things like, he was talking about the example when he was on his bike, which wasn't in the slides, but was in the dialogue that I uploaded. Made that available to 140 odd students. It was used about, they had about 5. The other thing is that while it was anonymous for their usage, the things they typed in, the answers they got were recorded, but they weren't attributed to anybody. It was nearly 5,500 interactions from 140 odd students. And in the 24 hours before the written exam, there was about just over 2,000 interactions.
Gosh, they weren't cramming, were they?
And the kind of things they would ask were, here's an exam question, what's a good answer? Of course, and that never dawned on me that would happen. But there were, in retrospect, what I did was that I prompt engineered that just to give answers to their questions. And now if I was doing this again, and I think this is more commonplace, you'd prompt engineer to be more Socratic in its interaction. So don't just give answers to questions. The chatbot wouldn't just give answers. It should tease out and have a dialogue. I'm not just a question answering system for you. You'd enter into a dialogue. Well, why do you think that's important? Why do you want to know that? What's that related to? So you'd have that sort of thing. I was really surprised by the amount of interaction it had. The feedback that we got from students was really positive. They liked it, especially at 4:00 in the morning.
The day before the exam.
Exactly. Yeah. When you can't call up your buddy and say, what did he mean by this? And you can't call up me and say, what did you mean by this? Yeah. So I think they benefited from the experience.
I could imagine that was fabulous, actually, because when you're trying to study and you suddenly there's some gap that you can't remember or you can't find a note. You can panic about that and obsess about it, whereas in fact you could just immediately access what you were being taught. Yeah, you still have to retain it, but you clear it out of your head straight away. Yeah. I know. Sorry to interrupt. So while it may have been one of the earlier ones, we've now taken that into live examples. So what we have now is that we record lectures during lectures, and we provide a chat interface to students so that they can ask questions about the current lecture. Okay. So if you're in a lecture and you're in a class of 200, the last thing you do is put up your paw and say, what did you mean by that lecture? Because everybody looks at you. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because I've heard this over and over again, that when people are learning through a tool like ChatGPT, whatever it happens to be, what you're describing, they are much braver at asking stupid questions because they're not being exposed. Yeah. Which means they learn. Yeah, right? Exactly. So I presume that's the same for you.
It's exactly that. And during a class, a student can go to either their phone or tablet or then go click, what did you mean by that? And then you catch up with the point that the lecturer made that you missed, and then you'll actually get benefit from the rest of the lecture.
Yes, yes, like having you in the room. Actually, I'm sure they love that idea.
They have their own individual and personalised version of the lecture.
Exactly. Yeah. So, did anything surprise you about how students interacted? I mean, were they very trusting, or did they test and push it, or did they find fault with it, or?
Well, that was done about 18 months ago, and at that time there was more trust or less mistrust of these generative AI tools. What surprised me was the uptake, the rapid, and then once they'd used it, the expectation that, well, when are we going to get this for all our modules? So their agility to adapt to new forms of learning is much faster than lecturers or teachers.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, you can see that if anybody has children or young adults in their house, everything is fast, everything is immediate, everything's not questioned, it's just embraced. Yeah. And in terms of, hallucinations or anything like that, was that a possibility? And do you know if it produced any, or?
I went through about 1,000 of the questions and answers looking for errors. And what I was doing was looking for errors. But I think that because it was prompt engineered to stay within the bounds of the course, there was less scope for hallucinations. And you can also reduce the amount of randomization or stochasm, which is in the responses from generative models. So I basically put very strict guardrails on it so that wouldn't occur. And I didn't find any of factual errors in the answers. But it was, back at that day, it was literally a question answering thing. It was, what do you mean by this? Here's the answer. What's a p-value? This is a p-value.
Yeah.
So it didn't engage in a sort of a conversation as such.
But the good thing is that you actually demonstrated something that we'll talk about after. We're going to take a break in a second. But the guardrailing.
Yeah.
Right? So that's such a relevance, isn't it, really, to people's nervousness about using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a really quick break because we've got an important message from somebody important or some people important. That is our partners, Accenture. So don't go away. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Through the power of cloud, data and AI, Accenture is helping the public sector by blending human ingenuity, technology and a delivery-focused culture to turn their ambitions into action. Be ready for any challenge by adopting a continuous reinvention mindset to deliver human-centric services that adapt and grow with your needs. Contact the team at Accenture to find out more.
So we're back again, and I'm just interested because Alan has just come back from Estonia. And Estonia, as you all know, are usually way ahead. We all know they had greenfield, they didn't have any legacy. They're amazing. They have been amazing in digital government for a long time. So tell me about your trip to Estonia.
I was at the Tallinn Digital Summit, which is a 2-day event with lots of government leaders, commissioners, prime ministers, ministers, etc. And part of the reason I went was that I wanted to see firsthand and talk to people who are involved in their initiative called Leap AI.
Okay.
So what they've done is they've come up with a deal or an arrangement with Google for Gemini and with OpenAI for ChatGPT. They have made this available to 4,300 high school teachers. So I think that's kind of transition year or junior cert level in Ireland. They have trained them up on this, those who want to. They have provided extensive AI literacy. They host these 2 large language models natively, so they're not hosted in Silicon Valley. They have prompt engineered them to take away the Silicon Valley influences. And they have fine-tuned them with Estonian content, a syllabus, Estonian language content. And they are next month in November of 2025 making them available to 25,000 students in Estonia.
Okay.
And the teachers have the choice to either incorporate it into their teaching, and it's right across all subjects, from STEM subjects to humanities subjects to sports. Teachers have the option to incorporate it into or to leave it out as the teacher decides. As of the first 30 days of making it available to teachers, more than 50% of the teachers have signed up and are using it or will be using it. And the expectation is that'll rise to about 60 or 70% by when it's made available to the students. So what does that mean? That's like, a national rollout of what, I did on a very small basis
with
and a very
experiment,
limited basis.
The rest of us.
Yeah. And what they get is not the free version of ChatGPT, because the free version of ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot or whatever wants to engage, wants to talk to you, wants to find out what keeps you talking. Whereas,
asks you, do you want more? Do you want more? Do you want more?
More of what you like and what you want to hear. So it's very self-satisfying for people who are using it. But it's engineered to have a more Socratic approach. It's to say, when a student comes along and says, tell me about Mars. Well, what do you want to know about Mars? And you enter into
what context
teacher.
do you want to know about Mars? Yeah.
So it's like a teacher would do, not just giving you the answer. Mars is a planet which is blah, 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 etc. Why is it red? Well, why do you think why do you think it's red? Oh, I think it's because it's got red sand on it. Well, that's partly true, but it's also to do with the filtering of right. So it's as if you're talking with a teacher in a very Socratic kind of way.
At a very basic level, just so I know, why did they do that combination of Gemini and OpenAI? ChatGPT. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, not getting locked into one vendor.
Okay.
It was one, and keeping the contracts short duration. So they have these contracts for 12 months only. So both the OpenAI dev team who helped to produce the ChatGPT version, and the Google team DeepMind team who helped produce the Gemini version know that they want to get a renewal of that. They have to do it properly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Copilot and Claude and others are dying to get in there. Actually, one of the interesting ones that they didn't include was Mistral.
Okay.
French model.
Yeah.
And the Mistral were at this meeting, so I wouldn't be surprised to see something happen in that area.
Pitch for the business as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of, firstly, it looks like the uptake is going to be fabulous.
Yeah.
they've thought about, not just being black and white, question, answer. Some of the stuff you learned actually through your experiment, right?
Yeah.
But what do you think they want the outcome to be? What's the goal, the dream, the aspiration?
Yeah, there was a presentation from their Minister for Education who talked about we are under evolutionary pressure not to be bigger and stronger and faster, but to think differently and to think faster. And she was promoting System 2 type thinking, where we reason about something before giving an answer, as opposed to System 1 type thinking, where we laying things off by heart. And her point, and a lot of the drive for this, comes from her belief that these prompt engineered and fine-tuned language models will encourage more System 2 type thinking. And that's been the driver behind it. I also found it interesting to talk to the guy who leads this program, and he isn't a technologist. He's a principal in a school.
Okay.
So,
well, he's very much on the ground, which is always a good thing, right? So it's not kind of some theory.
Yeah, not blown away by the technology, not sort of bought into the technology and trying to roll out the technology irrespective, but coming from a school principal's background.
Yes. And do you think that it would be a big mistake if we just sat back and wait for Estonia to finish the experiment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what do you think in an ideal world, we should be doing in our own country?
I think we should be doing pilots of this. At second level, we are way behind because our Department of Education has not yet produced guidelines for the use of generative AI in schools. And this is more than 550 days after the previous minister promised them.
And there are other guidelines out there to use as a beginning point, aren't there?
Absolutely, yeah. So
what's the hesitation, do you think?
I don't know.
Okay.
Our own Department of Public, Department of Public Expenditure, NDP Delivery and Return, Reform, have produced those guidelines for the use of generative AI and other forms of AI in the public sector.
I happen to Cassidy in here talking about them.
I happen to have a copy in front of me. I never go anywhere without my copy. She's laughing, but for those of you just listening on audio,
he's
see,
got
them there with me. I never go anywhere without them. But they are a great starting point, and it doesn't matter whether it's the Department of Defence or the Department of Education or the Department of whatever it might be. They are a very good starting point, a very good resource.
Okay, so we need to get on with it.
Yes.
Yeah, and considering Ireland's position within all of the technology companies that we currently and hopefully in the future attract, and the fact that we've got a very healthy ecosystem of kind of software technology firms of our own.
Yeah.
It would be terrible to have a huge gap between our children's education and the way they actually live their lives, which is we're all using.
And what you're saying is absolutely right. But in addition to that, they're all using it anyway.
I know what I'm saying. We're all using it. you know. And I think to use it at its best is to have guidance around how to use it.
But to have no guidance and to be using the free version of ChatGPT or even any of the other models, whose sole drive is engagement, to just keep you talking, and to tell you more of what you want to hear, thus forcing you even more so into your information bubble.
Which goes back to your guardrails that you put on. Look, this is information within this model that I feed it and that keeps on topic. Yeah. Right, and that if we don't put systems like that within education in the way that you've done or the way they're doing it in Estonia, we risk people just going off and kind of off-piste and getting, what you said, being fed what they want to hear.
And they'll get the wrong recipe for marmalade.
Okay, I'm going to go to a different topic.
Okay.
Tell me about your energy tariff project, because you used AI, didn't you, to see how you could help real households save money in terms of their energy. Yeah. And then let's think about how that might apply. Yeah. Aside of what you did.
Yeah. Okay. So we have about 10 or 12 domestic energy suppliers. I could list off the names, but that would be advertising some of them. Everybody knows them. You know them. We don't.
When our contract's coming to an end.
Yes. When your contract, which is typically 12 months duration, and then your rates go up, or your 20%, 30% or 40% discount comes out. We also have about 95% of us have smart meters in our home. And this was a 1 point something.
How do you know you have a smart meter in your home?
It flashes a light.
Okay.
As opposed to a spinning dial.
Or outside?
Wherever your meter is.
Okay. All right.
And what these things do is that it cost us over $1 billion to invest in these, and it took about a 5 or 6 year time period to do this. They record your usage in your house every 30 minutes and upload it to ESB networks. And ESB networks then give that data to whichever is your domestic energy supplier, and they calculate your bill. That's not enough, however, as a benefit. It's also used by the networks to plan routes and monitor the usage of the network, etc. But you can download your data. You can go to ESB Networks, you create an account, download it. It's a dirty big spreadsheet that's, miles and miles long. And if you wanted to, if you're really nerdy and geeky, you can start to play with it. Or you can take that file and upload it to our system. And we aren't the only one. There's EnergyPal, there's kilowatt.ie, and about 2 or 3 others.
What's your one called?
Our one is called ElecTariffs. That's ELEC-TARIFFS.ie. What we do is we take your file and we calculate how much you would have paid with each of about 60 different tariffs. And then we send you an email with that list, including a link to how to do the switch. Now, I actually switched provider last week.
Okay.
It took about 10 minutes, right? And you cannot be cut off. Your electricity cannot be cut off. I reckon I saved about, for me, I was already on a good tariff. So it saved me about 100 quid a year.
Well, look, it's worth doing.
Oh, it is unbelievably
and
worth doing.
If it's easy, it's definitely worth doing.
Yeah. Now, there's a bit of palaver associated with it. You need to have a bit of technical literacy to be able to go and set up an account and blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. But one of the things, the benefit, the difference between our system and the others, and we're not in competition, well, we're kind of in competition, but we're not really in competition, is that when you upload your smart meter data with us, we get to use it for research. So we have been able to analyse the performance of tariffs, not just for an individual, but for thousands. And I mean many thousands of people who've donated their data to us. And we found that there is a single tariff, which is the cheapest for 90% of people. No, I'm not going to tell you what it is. Go and find out what it is yourself, because you may be one of the 10% for whom it is not.
Okay.
We also found a tariff.
Go on, tell us.
No. And we also found a tariff that is the most expensive for about a third of people.
Okay. So
people are using that tariff, and the difference between the most expensive and the least expensive is about 60%.
Well, that's a big amount.
Now, when you talk about me saving 100 quid, that's great, Alan, you saved 100 quid. But there's somebody who's paying €1,000 a year for their electricity, and they're on the right tariff. But if they were paying the wrong tariff, they would be paying 1,600. That's 600 quid. So anyway, we put this system together. It's, as I said,
you use Agentic AI within?
Yeah.
Okay, so we better, before we get into that, just explain, what is Agentic AI?
No, I'm going to answer that. I'm going to.
Now listen.
I know we're pressed for time, but we did use AI in this system because for people who have less than 12 months of data, we used AI to fill in and to impute the missing data in a clever way by using the data, the patterns from other people. Okay. So yes, we used AI in that ElecTariff system. Now, your question about what's Agentic AI.
Because I thought that was Agentic AI might have been used within the solution, but I think we want to talk about Agentic AI. But I think always first, let's start with what is it?
Yeah. So Agentic AI is a form of software where instead of having a single big program that you run through deterministically and it comes up with, if statements and conditionals, et cetera, and it follows a process, an algorithm. With Agentic AI, you've got a program that does something, and another program that does something else, and a third and a fourth and a fifth and sixth, and got several, maybe have a dozen different programs, but they communicate with each other. Okay. So the output of one can go to the input of two, or it can go to the input of three, so that they orchestrate. And the best analogy is an orchestra. Every instrument has a different sound, but they are all coordinated by a conductor. And with agentic software, what you've got is you've got multiple individual programs that do their own thing, produce their own sound, but they are orchestrated and they can communicate with each other. It's been around for decades, and for many years we used to laugh at people who worked in the area because it only worked in toy worlds. Because whenever it would come up with a real world problem, it would go, oh, I don't know how to solve that problem. Okay. What's made it popular now is that you can couple agentic software and agents when they come up with a problem with a large language model. Okay. It can ask ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Copilot, what do I do with this situation? And then it gets an answer from that. So instead of having to revert to a human to steer it in the right direction, it goes and asks the large language model. So has it got capabilities of actually making decisions and taking action? So give me an example. So the example that is often touted is, I want to do a trip. I want to make a planning trip. But another example is I want to get a visa to go to China, for example. And there's an agent that I have that provides information on me, and there's an agent in the Chinese embassy, and they go and talk to each other to provide information. And then there's a flag raised for me because I've been to China 3 times before. So then they want to interview me. So there's an agent from the Chinese embassy, talks to my agent, says, why do I want to go there? And my agent looks up my calendar and looks up my people I'm going to meet. And all of these things associated with processes happen in the background. That system doesn't exist. And every time I hear people talking about agentic software, it'll help you book a holiday, it'll do all the, I think, yes, it doesn't exist yet. Or it'll help you, organize a party by sending out invitations and booking the venue and doing all the food and drink. I go, that doesn't exist either.
Yeah.
There's one example that I found that does exist, and it's called what is it called? The Microsoft Healthcare Agent Orchestrator.
Okay.
And it's for cancer treatment. It's rolled out in 5 US states. And what it has is it has 9 different agents which do different things. It has a patient history agent. So what it would do is that if I've a diagnosis, it would look up all my patient history. Now, not the fact that I broke my arm when I was 6 years old playing football, but the relevant stuff, the recent stuff, the treatments I've been on, the drugs I might be on for heart condition or whatever. And I'm not, right? But that kind of thing. There's a radiology agent that is able to analyse CT scans and MRIs and come up with the sizing of a tumour and its stages, etc. There's a pathology agent which is able to look at biopsies and come up with an analysis. There's a staging agent that is able to determine whether it's stage 1, 2, 3, 4 cancer. There's a clinical trials agent that is able to look up clinical trials relevant to it. And then there's an overall orchestrator that puts all these things and has them talking to each other. Final thing they have is a report agent that pulls all of this, I'm going to say, quote, discussion, this interaction among the agents into a recommended treatment platform. And that then goes to the consultant or the team overseeing me.
Okay.
Now, when I was describing this to somebody, they said, well, there's probably an insurance agent in there as well to see, are you covered?
Yeah.
Well,
only big things that I'm covered for.
Yeah, but that is good. That's an example.
Is that actually live being used?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's been used in
And what kind of outcomes do you know they're getting? Or?
I don't know the outcomes, but I know that every one of the stages has had to go through regulatory approval for the whatever is the stages for the US cancer treatment.
Yes.
And I know it's been running since about May or June of this year in 5 different locations in the US. That's the first real concrete example. And what it does is it reduces down to minutes what used to take hours or days, because you'd always be waiting on the patient history. Where is that stuff? We're waiting on this, we're waiting on that. Yeah. There's always a delay with the labs. There's always a delay with the CT scans or whatever else. But this automates and coordinates and synchronizes and orchestrates. I know that's a very, very visual type way to describe
but it makes sense. Yeah.
But it puts all those things together. And that's, I think, that I've come across, it's the first really concrete example of it working.
Okay. So let's skip back to Ireland in the real world, right?
Yeah.
So you're on the AI Advisory Council, which is the government's advisory council. Are we miles away from that? I mean, is there appetite for going that fast ahead with things like Agentic AI within our own service?
I think we will be surfing on the wave of innovation that is triggered by the big tech companies. I mean, this is Microsoft that did this, and it will be Microsoft, it will be Anthropic, it will be OpenAI, it will be DeepMind that will create these innovations, because they are the ones who have the technology and the access to the models. I mean, that one that I described there wasn't just using ChatGPT as its background model. It had developed and fine-tuned and built a model for CT analysis and for MRI analysis and for tumor analysis and for biopsy analysis. We can only do that in piecemeal. This requires big technology to put all of its power behind. And by power, I mean all of its human capital resources, its scientists, and its sort of investment in computing resources into doing this. So we're not behind, but we're never going to be ahead. Yeah.
So hopefully, but we'll be ready to jump on it, though. I mean, is there a like, I know when we first started talking about Gen AI, with guests here, which is not that long ago at all. There was, we'll see, test. And I feel like it's moved now. It's more, why aren't we?
Yeah.
But do you feel that's coming through from what you're seeing from your colleagues in government?
I think in some places and in some government departments, given that this is an audience for this podcast, yes, but in others, no. I think, as I said at the top of this, there are some which are, good examples, and there are those that are not. And those that are not are still at the denial stage. But when we encounter something really traumatic to our personal lives or to our professional lives, we go through different stages of grief. The first is denial. Geez, that didn't happen, did it? Right? And then you try to reason with it, and then you bargain with it, and eventually you reach some point of acceptance. There's a lot of people still in denial about generative AI. There's some people who are saying we should still ban it.
A bit late.
Yeah.
The horse is bolted.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we just have to wait and see then, won't you? But I think, look, you could argue that Ireland has got a history of having really big changes, societal changes that have happened because of our membership of the EU.
That's true, yes.
And we accept that because either we want to wait and see what somebody else is doing, or in fact we're just brought along on the coattails anyway. And it sounds like you feel that's what's going to happen with Gen AI, perhaps within our own public sector, is that the big scalable changes may happen because we find somebody else has done it, use that framework. It could be Estonia, it could be the States.
Yeah, and it will happen really, really quickly. And those previous big traumas and innovations and upheavals that you hinted at there, they happen over a period of time. The cycle time for this is much more reduced.
That's the hard part, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we weren't talking about...
it's a good part as well.
Yeah, we were talking about agent-based software about 2 or 3 years ago, and we've only been talking about agentic AI in the last 18 months. Wow.
What would you do if you could wave a magic wand to make sure that we don't move too slowly? Because as you say, this is moving really quickly.
Yeah.
So we won't have a lot of time to think about it. It's not like banning plastic bags, know.
Yeah.
So what would you like to see happening?
AI literacy. And it's something we in the Advisory Council, and I'm one of 14 people in there, and with lots and lots of different backgrounds. There's academics, there's researchers, there's people from startups, there's people from legal background, there's trade union. And all the time we keep coming back to AI literacy. And it's not the you and me kind of AI literacy, or even the people who are listening to this podcast because they're vaguely interested in something to do. It's everybody else, right? It's at the public level, right? It's public understanding of this. And, that's, I think, hugely important, so that the people walking the streets have a grasp of and have an understanding of it. But it's also the leadership. People at the top end of government departments have to get their head around and say, this isn't going to disappear.
Yeah. I remember when we were, this is a while ago, right? And thank goodness it's a while ago, we were designing the front end for the first electronic e-cabinet here in Ireland when I had my agency. And at that time, we were trying to kind of figure out the user experience and make it feel like a website rather than trying to make it feel like a whole lot of servers. But would be speaking to the minister's, assistant or his private secretary, and we found out they were printing off their emails and reading them. So I hope we're not that far behind because Gen AI is in everybody's hand.
Yeah.
But at the same time, knowing the potential of how to use it properly is not everybody knows that. So are they doing that somewhere else that you think we could use as a model?
I think I'm less worried about government and ministers and TDs because there are some really well-informed people on the government benches. I'd be more concerned with the people who are in the government departments.
For the public sector?
Yes. Yeah. That's... we do have a joint Oireachtas committee on AI, which has been having hearings, and I appeared in front of them. You don't appear in front of these.
You're invited.
Testify.
Oh, you testify.
So I testified.
Okay.
It's all terribly formal, but it was very, very, very informative. So Taoiseach did create that, and they do really interesting things and are bringing in and hearing lots of people. So that's raising awareness on the backbenches and in the ministerial circles, but it's the government departments that is most irregular. I'm sorry, I've lost what your question was.
So I was asking, is there anybody, any country, any place where you're seeing that education at man on the street and the public service that you think we could model? Estonia, okay. It always comes back to Estonia.
The furthest, the other side of the European Union, as far away as you can get. But it's an eye-opener.
Yeah. Well, look. This has been so interesting, and we could talk about this, but actually we've run out of time. It's like we're slightly over. So thank you so much, Alan. It's been a great conversation. I suspect you'll be back because there'll be more to tell us.
Yeah, and what you didn't see, listeners, was the eye was thrown on me there. I suspect you'll be back, and the eye was thrown on me.
Well, look, thank you, Alan. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Maeve.
Before I go, I just want to thank the team here. So that's Peter Rice, who's the studio manager, video editor Neil Horner, sound engineer and videographer today is Lee Brennan. And thank you for listening. And don't forget to come back next time for Transform Gov.